Dark, brooding, and complicated. Oh, and don't forget evil. This deadly combination is a strong force in the bad guys you see on shows, movies, fanfics, and more. Heck, they've probably made their way deep under your skin, and you want them there. It's not exactly smart, much less morally right, for anyone to like them as much as we usually do. So why is it that there are so many who worship this totally problematic alter? We're here to find out. The thing about this type of character is that they don't see themselves as the bad guy, and they can be very, very good at convincing you of the same. Think Shadow and Bones the Darkling. The bad guy doesn't always fall under the villain archetype. Think anti-heroes like Vincenzo Cassano, a clear protagonist, but definitely not the stereotypical good guy, versus Hannibal Lecter. Then of course there are the ones that blur the lines. Severus Snape and Kylo Ren are arguably the biggest and most popular recent examples. It is an incredibly wide spectrum. Researchers from Auburn University and Converse College said in a 2012 paper that there are the bad boy personas who break societal rules for no apparent reason. And at the other extreme are those who break societal rules because the rules are unjust. From James Dean's Rebel Without a Cause, to The Godfather's Michael Corleone, to Shadow and Bones the Darkling, we are hooked. The same paper argued that in the same way that we are not willing to ever think of ourselves as bad people, we know and can justify why we do the questionable things we do. We also find it hard to condemn the villains whose stories are laid out for us on screen. The discussions on whether Snape was bad or good will arguably never end. We can trace his path from bullied and ignored child, to Death Eater, to Dumbledore murderer, to his ultimate sacrifice at the end. All of that paints how we see him, and how we can kind of justify or at least identify with his less than good actions, like betrayal and literal murder. If we knew less about fictional characters like Kylo Ren and the Darkling, we would be less likely to forgive their questionable actions. We definitely wouldn't be as empathetic to their cause either. We know a great deal about how the situation is influencing him. It allows us to be as kind to him as we generally are to ourselves, said the researchers. The more you're told not to want it, the more you want it. It doesn't take being an actual psychologist to know that much. On the opposite of finding reasons to empathize with bad guys is the idea that they fulfill the less morally sane and sound parts of the human brain. PhD candidate Rebecca Krause from Northwestern University argues, when people feel protected by their veil of fiction, they may show greater interest in learning about the dark and sinister characters who resemble them. Think of it as a cognitive safety net that allows us to vicariously live our deepest, darkest desires without diminishing our idea of self. Sure, if you see people who are genuinely terrible in real life, the natural response is, at the very least, not to like them. But fiction provides a layer of security. So, if you find a bad guy character you can relate to, then there's less shame in the attraction. There seems to be something alluring and enticing about having similarities with a villain, explained Krause. Is it okay to think it cool when someone in real life kills a dude with a pencil? No! But wait, what about Keanu Reeves as John Wick? Oh yeah, that was super cool, you say. Excuse the super reductive analogy, but you get our point. Bottom line, you encounter a fictional bad guy. You hate them, you love them, you want to sleep with them, you want to be them. The conflict is all part of the fun. Best part is that there is a low chance of your real-life emotional investment biting you in the ass. Disclaimer, we are aware some beloved characters can become very real to some. We mean no disrespect to the fandoms. Remember when Zac Efron portrayed serial killer Ted Bundy on Extremely Wicked, Shockingly Evil and Vile? And folks were conflicted with a capital C? Yeah, we get that IRL Ted Bundy did build his charisma. The convicted killer practically had a cult following. But there's a certain line that's hard to keep in mind. Becoming invested is so much easier when faced with a character that not only has a compelling story, but has an attractive face to match. And in an industry like show business, you can be sure they will present you with characters that are pleasing to the eyes. Add the general belief that what is beautiful must be good. And they've got you hook, line, and sinker. The 2012 paper points out that the general narratives of old media, think Disney classics and even old literature, delineate between the ugly as bad and the beautiful as good by default. So when somebody like the Darkling comes on screen, you'll have to excuse us for not immediately realizing Barnes' gorgeous face hides something sinister. Bottom line is that these titles need audiences to be invested in the story. Studios will probably keep casting hot people in problematic roles. They're definitely accountable to an extent here, but that doesn't mean viewers are completely spotless either. In the end, it's still totally your choice whether you're going to dive right in and feed into his possibly flawed reasoning, or stick with simply admiring the bad guy from the other side of the screen.